thank you for coming back.
Yep.
We spoke a few weeks ago, and since then, a fair bit has occurred. I saw the 7:30 report.
Yep.
And then our interview was published. And then last Thursday, I picked up the paper and I think I had a message from you to say you were resigning or you had resigned. So you've been through a lot in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Let's start with last Thursday. What brought that on?
Look, there was a range of issues at the board and with what I felt the executive management weren't addressing at head office for RSL. And being a volunteer, and I stress to everyone, we are volunteers, and it was a very needy organisation. It was taking 2 to sometimes 5 days a week, sometimes for a month at a time, and because those issues that we were identifying and raising weren't being addressed, we decided to, as good directors do, remove ourselves. I have every bit of confidence that had we gone to a vote, we would have won the vote, but it came down to asking ourselves what winning looks like.
Okay, so in relation to the vote, the media has sort of suggested that your resignation was immediately before a vote at which it was likely you would be removed anyway. And how much weight do you put on that news?
Not much weight at all. So look, I'm dead certain that we had the membership behind us. I'm dead certain that we were there for the right reasons, and I'm certain that the membership needs another strong leader to step into the organisation and not just be a mouthpiece on the board for an excessively controlling management of RSL.
So if then you were so confident that you would have a motion voting you to remain, what was the motivation for deciding to withdraw anyway?
Well, I think it's lost on a lot of people, in particular the veteran community. It's a volunteer role, and Paul and I still have Operational Legal Australia, the firm, to run. And I'm of the firm view that we've lost a hell of a lot of money contributing to RSL, and it's not a complaint. It's just it's a huge commitment.
You mean by lost money, just not practicing?
Being at the firm, not practicing, still having to pay a mortgage, not seeing my kids. I think I perhaps would have seen my kids more if I was in service. But if I added up the time allotment too, look, the organisation says that they want younger veterans and they say that they want a young president. We've got tens of thousands of fantastic male and female service personnel that have served fantastic careers in defence, and I hope that they do gravitate towards RSL. But when you leave defence after 15 years like I did and transition and move into a business and a small business and you build that business up, it's a huge strain on family and work life to be able to manage the burden of a volunteer role like RSL.
So fair to say the personal cost to you just became too much, even though you were confident that you would have been voted in voted to remain?
Yeah, you're right. I actually took my kids camping the weekend before and I just had such a great time with them. My father came and I just thought, this is the stuff I should be doing. Yeah. It's not why I left RSL. I knew if I won, it'd probably be a full-time role for the next 12 months to iron it out and readdress and correct all of those governance issues, the tax issues, the stakeholder issues. And it became a burden because you have a management crew at RSL, and the roundabout figures, and they're on the website. Up until June, they were in a $2.5 million deficit, and their wage bill was nearing $7.9 million per annum. And if you run a business, you have to make a dollar go far. If you run a charity, you have to make that dollar go 10 times further. Yeah. And it's not sustainable to have the oldest, biggest, wealthiest, almost $1 billion worth of assets with no income. It's not a sustainable model. And I think I'm a strong believer that, there was other issues as well. The employment of head office was going up to, above 40 staff. I think only 2 of them were veterans. And we had a really strong drive to make sure that if you're a veteran organisation and you're promoting, veteran welfare and veteran employment, you need to set the bar high for yourself and set the example. And they weren't part of the Prime Minister's Veteran Employment Awards. And, it should have been a flagship for veterans leaving defence to become involved in the corporate atmosphere to then move on to other things. So
in that regard, I think it's maybe my ignorance, but I don't know how many people know this. What is the difference between an RSL club arrangement and the RSL membership sub-branches?
Yeah. So one is the club system, beer and pokies. The other is care and welfare, being RSL New South Wales. So essentially, they were both the same entities. In the 70s, there was legislation introduced, and they had to split basically the clubs from the sub-branches. Unfortunately, back then, there was a lot of people that were on both boards and they did peppercorn deals for property to themselves. I think they probably lost in the vicinity of $1 billion worth of assets in today's value at the time. But, look, people have criticised me for calling out the use of the name by clubs. I still think it's an issue that needs to be addressed, but the clubs have a critical connection to our sub-branches, and I think they've got an extremely critical role in the community. They have the community club grant scheme that funds football teams and local, tangible outcomes for charities and community events.
So in your role as president, you weren't president of that section, the beer and pokies. You were part of the care and welfare section.
Yeah, that's it.
And so what work does that do in the community daily?
The RSL New South Wales?
Yes. Yeah. In the care community aspect of it? Yeah,
there's about 314 odd sub-branches across the state.
Yeah.
And, there's a heavy emphasis on what they do in regional New South Wales as well. A lot of veterans can't afford inner cities, so they do move out, and they're contributing to those local communities. And having a sub-branch out there for them to lean on or reach out to if they need any advocacy for DVA, just that first point of contact they can speak to veterans.
DVA just being
Veteran Affairs.
Okay, Department of Veteran Affairs.
Yeah, that's it. So, and I think that, those sub-branches are the heartbeat of the RSL, and they're out there in the community doing the hard work. And I think that there's a lot of probably displeasure on their part that head office are spending and asking for money every year from those sub-branches. And again, it's charitable funds.
So the funds are provided by who at a local level and then sent up to management for what purpose?
The sub-branches might do a fundraiser and then send that in, or they might donate, or they may have sold a property or divested assets and they have some money in the bank and then they contribute towards the running of head office. But I think it was becoming a little bit out of control in terms of, how much of that what percentage of that charitable dollar goes to the charitable purpose.
So if you had have been re-elected or remained in a position, the position you're in, what would the continuing mandate of yours and Paul's and the other two that resigned with you have been?
It would have been, my first mandate has always been uniting veterans, generational, gender, religion. I've always heard the stories of old veterans coming home from Vietnam and being mistreated. Ironically, that's still happening now, just a new generation. But I can say that there's brilliant mentors out there in that membership as well that I have so much time for. I would have stuck to the basics. I know I'm not trying to overly simplify it, but they don't have DGR status, deductible gift recipient status.
Okay.
So people need to be able to donate money to the organisation. There needs to be a high level of fidelity and transparency with the community, because if they're going to give a dollar or more, they want to make sure that dollar is going to that intended purpose.
So that is interesting that you say that, because when I listened to the ABC 7:30 report, the suggestion was that, in fact, you were involved in sort of conflicts in your own interest in that regard. So I know and understand that you refute all of that.
Yeah.
But how is it that you could come to be accused of that? And without wanting to, be accusatory, how is it that these conflicts and directions towards making sure
I can say hand on heart, there were no conflicts. Every conflict is managed. I find it ironic that people who aren't perhaps solicitors on the board or in the system, throw their hands up in the air and run around and say conflict, and they can't articulate what that is. And I think that there's a large level of political positioning going on. It's always been a political organisation.
All right, well, let's stop there, because you presumably were at home that Tuesday evening.
Yes.
And were you aware that report was running and you turned it on to listen, or were you...
The 7:30 report?
Yeah.
Look, I knew it was coming on because they had reached out the week prior. I discussed some of the accusations and the points she put out.
So this was statements that were being made to you on the phone?
Yeah.
Okay, before you knew what was going to be said.
The relevant evidence to disprove those positions. So I worked in fact and evidence. So I would say that there's not many people that would submit themselves to a live interview unless you had the fact and evidence to disprove the claims. But I think it's a funny thing, and I'll probably reflect on it more later, but the thing that makes RSL so special is the passion that people bring to the organisation. And one of my mandates was to stop cannibalising each other, start promoting veteran outcomes. You can't be part of a welfare organisation and then when there's a malicious or vexatious complaint about a person, pick up the pitchfork and go after them without knowing the facts and issues. So I really feel strongly that there's a lot of people in that story that have been involved and have left or had a hard exit from RSL. And look, it wouldn't matter if it was Mick Bainbridge as president and Paul James as director. Those people will keep grinding their axe. And unfortunately, they'll attack the next president. So my fear for the organisation is that if you look at the volunteerism in the state, and it's an abrupt way to say it, but there's this scale, and there's people with no skill, nothing really much to offer, good people, but they've got a lot of time and they can be part of the organisation. And then on the other side, you've got people with fantastic skills and professional skills and can implement those skills, but they don't have the time. So
how did you then come to be voted on in the first place? What occurred for you to make the proposition and get accepted? Look,
I'm a strong believer that RSL is a hybrid of any organisation you might, and because it's a membership-based organisation, I think a lot of corporate people get the shits at that. But I am completely committed to that membership having the say of what they want and need as a membership and their own future.
And these are basically, you're saying, the membership ex-veterans.
Yes.
Ex-ADF people who are now veterans of that.
Yeah, that's correct. And I really felt strongly that they should determine the future of RSL. And it was at a time period after my brother passed away from cancer. I felt like I wanted to commit something I was passionate about again. And I put my hand up and was elected president. And it was funny because the journalist said, "Oh, you were held out to be the hero of RSL, and now you're the failure." I said, "You said all those things. I was just a veteran doing my part for, I think anyone that serves in defence, you have a mindset to want to improve and want to help, and
you, Mick, well, I know from our previous chat, you suffered and continue to suffer physical disabilities or physical effects and emotional effects as a result of service.
Yeah, look, it's an ongoing thing. I'm always trying to be a better person, a better dad, a better colleague, and look, you can probably be abrupt with some things, but you have a different lens that you look through, my fear for RSL is you've got a fairly left-leaning executive body that's managing a subset of the community that they would otherwise despise. My first meeting as a board, one particular person that made a derogatory comment about members being old, stale, privileged white men. I called it out. I said that there's a wall in Canberra with over 100,000 names on it, and you can't criticise this cohort of members who are contributing as volunteers. It's a time capsule lens. You can't criticise them for being, I reminded the whole board that a lot of these people in the 60s and 70s had their birth dates called out on the radio or the TV, and it wasn't a Kentucky tour to Vietnam that they got. It was a conscription. So we changed the trajectory of their lives. And yes, they're majority males in RSL. I think I'd really like to think that we can get to a position where it's parity males and females because of the nature of service nowadays. And I think that as veterans, we all have a lot to offer, and we shouldn't have these thousands of ex-service organisations competing in the same space. But the one thing that holds them all back is cannibalism. If they just looked after each other and backed each other, it would be a far more, I think it would take off, and they would unite, and they'd get more tangible outcomes for veterans out there.
So you're now reverting back in your daily life to being a practicing solicitor with your firm with Paul. And what has all this service experience and the political fallout, if I can put it that way, of your voluntary service there taught you, or bringing you back to be able to do in your life and your business and your family?
Well, I now know the term of let no good deed go unpunished. Look, I think that Paul and I are going to keep committing to our veteran community. Before coming onto RSL, we were doing circa, $400,000 worth of pro bono work a year. We'd like to continue that. And frustratingly, we can do a hell of a lot more from our little practice than what I could as a president of RSL.
And what do veterans need? Like, what are the typical services that veterans are looking for when they're alone or apart from the job they've done for a number of years?
Well, look, I'll be criticised for having this view, but having lost mates in service, in combat, and accidents, and lost mates to suicide, I think suicide or suicidal ideation is a big issue in our veteran community, and the statistics show that it's far higher. But I often think that it's, and this is just my view, but it's not the root cause. Their service isn't the root cause of a suicide. I think it's an underlying factor. And if they go through a extremely stressful custody battle with kids, or a family law breakup, I think it's those issues that cause the other problems that lead to then suicide.
Make it worse, exactly.
Yeah. And that's just a personal view. I'm not a doctor.
No, of course.
But I see it at the coalface from the firm's perspective. So, look, in general, I think, RSL is a great community-based organisation. It's a great opportunity to raise funds in the community to help veterans. But most young veterans don't want to go to a local sub-branch meeting and sit around. They want to go somewhere where they can take their kids. They want to have a catch-up with other veterans, perhaps going through those same issues as them. Even though RSL has great mentors and a fantastic membership, they want gyms. They want active lifestyle. They want a holiday unit they can go to with their family. They want, not like legal aid work, because a lot of them don't have the money. They're not entitled to legal aid support, and there's a misconception in the veteran community that legal aid will fix it, but none of them meet the test to be able to be provided that support. So I think the ex-service organisations should look largely towards helping these veterans.
And is that what utopia would be for you if the RSL were perfectly...
Well, Paul and I did try and do that initially. We tried to set up a panel law firm scenario. Obviously, our firm was not in it. I think there's a lot of rumour out there, and I welcome this opportunity to point it out. But there was no income, there was no earn for this. We were volunteers. Look, I'm just passionate, and Paul's passionate about improving the lives of veterans and their families, because they have these incredible careers. They risk life and limb. They transition. It's a really hard transition. It's not just, I think I said last time, injury, career and sense of identity. there's a whole nother side to that equation, and that's the family, that they have to reintegrate as a family. They might move, that the partner or other half has to, train or be re-employed in another industry, so that they live this transient lifestyle. So anything that goes towards helping them navigate that transition and not end up in the family law court is, I think, a fantastic thing, not just for them, but their kids.
Okay. Well, you now have made the choice, obviously, to step away.
Yeah.
So you'll be supporting those ideals and objectives in your practice.
Yeah.
And just looking forward and hoping that the RSL does the same.
Yeah, look, absolutely. I think it's a great organisation. Anyone that looks back through the history books with RSL, it was apparently more political back in the 50s than it is now. But I don't want to see the executive strip profit worried about their own incomes for the next few years. This is an organisation that has to last beyond. I always say to people that when I was the president, we are but the custodian of this amazing organisation. It has to last another 100 years. It can't. And the other thing is that we need a view that, and look, it's my hope that there'll be an inquiry. I certainly have advocated to the Premier and the Minister about that. There are some serious governance risks and issues that I think were extremely unfairly portrayed in the media and incorrect, that need addressing. But I think that anyone that goes onto the board of RSL needs to show their veteranhood. And by that, I mean they need to join the organisation as a general member. They need to work in the sub-branch. They need to work at the district level, and they need to work up to the board. It can't work like another commercial entity where someone parachutes in. It can't be a CV stocking stuffer, because they're so at odds with the membership that they're never going to get traction and move forward. The membership are entitled to and lean on that constitution as a contract to them being the key stakeholder.
Mick, thank you.
Thanks
That's
very
really
much.
Informative for me.
Cheers.
And very supportive of you and what you're doing, and good luck in your practice.
Thanks so much, mate.
Thank you.
Cheers.